Hi everybody, this is Anne. Most potters have a collection of their favorite items that they use to texture and decorate their clay. Adding to the collection can be addictive, leading to spending a lot of money on expensive stamps, texture sheets, rolling pins, etc. In this video, Xiem set a challenge for me to look for items to texture my clay that cost less than $2, then creatively use it in a project. Here's what I came up with. I went to two of my favorite stores, the craft store and the thrift store, to see what I could find within the price limit. Surprisingly, I had a lot to choose from if I used my imagination, but I limited it to 10 for the purposes of this video. I rolled out a clay slab and experimented with the different ways to use the items. This one is one of my favorites, the backside of a bath mat. The suction cups are round and evenly spaced apart. You can lay it down straight over the clay or on point for diamond designs. I just rolled my rolling pin over the top, then peeled it away. I hand-built this container and used the matte texture on this panel. I added another layer of round texture inside of each suction cup with the backside of this wooden tool. In the wood section of the craft store, I found very ornate hardware surprisingly for under $1. I like this particular one with the low relief heart and cutouts. I played around with the symmetry of the shape for an interesting squared off pattern. I should superglue a thin dowel to the back so it'll release better from the clay, but the X-Acto knife worked well too. When I filled the slab with the pattern, here's what I came up with for the second panel of my container. I can see a whole project with that texture with the nice celadon glaze breaking into the crevices. In the leatherworking section of the craft store, I found this attractive Concho. What I like best about it is it already has its own knob on the back for easier release. The face of the Concho is rounded a bit, so when I created the texture I rocked it back and forth to capture all four sides. I was left with a beautiful negative pattern. When I made imprints of the pattern connecting to each side, I was left with the positive plain clay diamond shapes between each one. I added that texture to the third panel of my clay container. It would be fun to create a mold of the negative space and use it to create the positive pattern for a low relief texture as well. I found these bookmarks and paper clips in the thrift store. Originally I thought I might use the pointed ends of the bookmarks, but I found that I liked the paper clips more. Their unique shape lends itself to quite a few ways I could imprint with it. Here's my favorite. I created a center with the back side of my wood tool. Then using the side of the clip, I pressed that around the center like flower petals. After I had the first one down, I spaced out one of the petal shapes from the last flower, then created the rest of the flower. Now here's what I came up with for the fourth side of my container. Now here's the whole container that I built with those textures. Any of these textures would look great to cover its own hand-built project and then glazed with a beautiful colored celadon. For the next project, I found these burlap party banners. Someone in my Facebook group used it to texture her sculptures, so I thought I'd play around with it. I thought it'd make a good border, but maybe on an applique. To do that, I rolled out a very thin slab on a piece of plastic wrap so I could peel it away without ripping. I think paper thin looks more professional. If the plastic peels away easily without the clay coming apart, I know the clay is not too brittle or too soggy. Laying it back down on the plastic, I pressed the burlap into the slab and gingerly worked it down with my fingers, making sure to get it all transferred. I want just a hint of the plain clay at the top of my applique, so I laid the edge of the ruler down just above the burlap texture to mark it. Then I laid the ruler down and cut away the excess clay from around the applique. I cut away the ends and softened and beveled the top with my finger. Now this will be my border edge. I'll show you how to use this and other textures in a moment. Stay tuned. Texture number 6 I also found at the craft store, these small butterfly cookie cutters. I could just use them to make light imprints of the shape on a slab, but I thought I'd cut all the way through the thin slab for another applique, first using the biggest cutter. At the same time, I textured the other part of the thin slab with the burlap. I used the medium cutter to cut over that. Now all I had to do was layer the burlap cut over the plain one for a beautiful layered applique. For my project, I had a lot of low relief, so I thought I'd counter that with a negative texture. These wooden stir sticks that I found were perfect. They have little balls on the end that made the most perfect little dots like Swiss cheese or dimples on a golf ball. Now here's how I used all 3 of them. I placed my burlap borders around the bottom edge and around the top opening to create a frame. Then I arranged the butterflies and the dimples inside the frame. The burlap top of the butterfly pulled in the texture from the frame. The thinness of the appliques worked to enhance the clay form shape without competing with it or changing the shape too much. On to the last project. For the first texture, I found these adorable molds for resin casting in the craft store. They're shaped like puzzle pieces. If I lightly press them into the clay, I can make fun patterns. I use the pattern to texture the panel of this petal-shaped piece. I also found some inexpensive pattern stencils. I like that there was 4 different patterns on one sheet. I rolled it firmly into the clay with my rolling pin. I used the stencil textures for the opposite side of my clay container. For the last project, I really had to get creative. I saw this very ornate glass candy dish and loved both the faceted sides and the hobnail dots on the bottom. I thought the hobnails would be fun to add to the bottom of my project, so I needed to make a mold of it first. I laid some clay over the bottom section. I pressed the clay over the hobnails using my fingers to make sure I captured each one entirely, plus the border. I cut away the excess clay and let that dry completely. That becomes my new mold. Now I can roll out my slab and press it over that mold to create the duplicate hobnail design like on my glass dish. I just cut away the excess clay, then attached it to the bottom of my piece. Here's the whole piece with all 3 textures on it. I hope these creative ways to use these simple objects are inspirational to you, so you can do a texture challenge on your own pottery. Thanks to the newest members of our Little Street Pottery Research Facility team. If you'd like to join the team and earn a title, click on the Super Thanks button or the link to buy me a coffee. It also really helps us out if you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. See you next time in the studio.